Snake, what are you doing?
I'm in a box.
A cardboard box? Why are you...
I don't know, I was just looking at it, and suddenly I got this irresistible urge to get inside. No, not just an urge. More than that. It was my destiny to be here. In the box.
Hideo Kojima is a true character in gaming history. While it's reductive to credit something as complex as a big-budget game to one person, Kojima-directed projects definitely have a distinct flavour. Nothing demonstrates this more succinctly than the sneaky Cold War odyssey with a bitchin' theme song, that is, Snake Eater. For the third installment of Metal Gear Solid, the futuristic technobabble was ditched in favour of 1960s nuclear tension, sprinkled liberally with James Bond-inspired camp. American operative Snake is sent into the jungle to rescue a defecting Soviet scientist, but things waste no time in going tits up, and Snake becomes the world's only hope of avoiding several thousand nuke-shaped holes. The setup might be straightforward, but this being Metal Gear, it doesn't stay that way.
I'll get you out of here, I promise. And we've got some of the best backup we could ask. Look. That's what they were making you build?
Yes. The capable of launching.
So how to go about preventing Armageddon then? Well, Snake Eater provides a forest full of baddies and challenges you to get to the end however you can. The levels aren't as grand as in Thief or the Hitman World of Assassination trilogy, but they share the same spirit, as there's no air quote right way to complete your objective. Instead, you're encouraged to experiment with your abilities and gadgets, mastering the environment and figuring out effective strategies. It's slightly brilliant. The process of getting your bearings in a new area, identifying threats, and forming a plan of action is the heart of Snake Eater's gameplay, and it's hard not to feel like a badass. Scan the grass for telltale rustling. Listen with your microphone for footsteps. Keep an eye out for boot prints, and always assume there's one more dude than you can see. Rash decisions lead to swift death, and only through patience, planning, and flexibility can you survive the jungle gauntlet. A good stealth game should make the player feel powerful when hidden and helpless when discovered, and Snake Eater nails that better than any of the other Metal Gear, helped in no small part by the wonderful realization of the jungle, which is by no means a soulless change of backdrop. I also love the sense of risk and reward that pervades the mechanics. It's often easier to sneak by a guard than take him down, for instance, yet he could provide ammo or the location of his mates. And clearing an area makes it much easier to find all the hidden goodies, but obviously requires you to dispose of several AK-wielding goons. Should you get spotted, also, there's usually a brief window to get an attack in before the alarm is raised. In short, skill is repaid, while less confident players must forego loot. Perhaps the most radical addition to the Metal Gear formula is the camouflage system, wherein you must collect uniforms to blend into the environment. There's a sense of power that comes with being near invisible, and an equal feeling of helplessness when the terrain doesn't permit effective concealment. Snake Eater's guards are generally less derpy than those of prior Metal Gears, and while it's entirely possible to open fire with your pistol if you really want to, at least on the easier difficulties, this is still by far the most stealth-focused chapter in the franchise. But there's more than just boring old humans to contend with. The forest teems with wildlife, friendly or otherwise, whose juicy innards must be devoured to sustain Snake's stamina. Lack of stamina affects your speed, accuracy, healing rate, and ultimately leaves you comatose. The quest for food is therefore never ending, and it's worryingly compelling to sample every critter and shrub. Beasts can also be employed against your enemies, either as distractions or weapons, and seeing a hungry guard scarf down a toxic frog never gets old. The sheer abundance of tricks and treats can be daunting, and Snake Eater definitely took me a while to grasp, even though it wasn't my first Metal Gear. If anything though, this only meant my eventual success was all the more rewarding, and my journey from clumsy gunslinger to ghost-like assassin was ludicrously fun. A sense of organic progression in a game, as one's skills improve from the start to the end, is something I imagine must be very hard to perfect. All in all, Snake Eater tries a downright crazy number of interesting things and gets a downright commendable number of them right. But for all my terrifying fangirl love, I'm not blind to the splotches on Kojima's canvas. I won't lie, a few of these problems could be deal breakers for some people. Let's start with the issue you'll notice before you've even pushed a button. Metal Gear is notorious for its love of cutscenes. Snake Eater is no exception, though the more methodical gameplay means there's often a longer gap between cutscenes than in any other game in the main series. Snake Eater does, however, set a bad first impression with a particularly exposition-laden introduction, regularly interrupting the tutorial so your mentor can ramble in a manner that feels way too preachy so early on. I genuinely worry how many people must have been turned off by this harrowing intro, and I have a hard time defending it. I can only assure you that once the game is confident you have the basics down, things do get more manageable. And while there are altogether too many radio conversations, the actual animated cutscenes are generally sublime, with stylish cinematography and animation that more than hold up years later. Characters have distinct mannerisms, exploiting the motion capture to its full, and the acting is mostly well above usual gaming fare, though the script does give the occasional whiff of odd translation.
Are you familiar with the theory of the missing link between apes and humans? Well, this technology will be the missing link between infantry and artillery. A kind of Metal Gear, if you will. And this magnificent Metal Gear will mark a revolutionary step forward in weapons development.
Metal Gear.
Snake himself stood out to me more as a personality than his future iterations, and has some subtle moments despite his bombastic choice of career. The length and extent to which gameplay gets interrupted is really my only problem. Kojima, for all his wisdom, desperately needs someone to sit him down and explain that sometimes less can be more. And yes, I've played Death Stranding and I liked it despite everything wrong with it. The mechanics are hardly without fault either. As much as I enjoy the camouflage system, Snake Eater lacks the seamless implementation that Metal Gear Solid 4 later employed, instead requiring constant visits to a dedicated menu, complete with separate face and body camouflage options for maximum monotony. It never quite stops being annoying, especially when darting between hiding spots that require a different change of clothes. The camo annoyance does, however, pale in comparison to a catastrophic camera issue that was mercifully fixed in later releases of the game. And here's hoping that whenever Konami pull their finger out and get round to porting Snake Eater for the first time in 10 years, they include another belated patch to fix the camouflage system. On a more subjective note, I also find that items like the tranquilizer gun and the thermal goggles are overpowered, at least for someone who's played the game as much as I have, and so experienced players might want to dismiss those options from their inventory in order to keep up the challenge on repeat playthroughs. Snake Eater also retains many of the franchise's control quirks, which seem increasingly out of place. Depending which specific version of the game you're playing, aiming a gun in first person and peering over a log can require some mighty finger gymnastics. And some of the melee combat relies on weirdly specific stick and button maneuvers. All these years have given me the muscle memory to overcome these strange arrangements, and I personally prefer the Xbox 360 version of the game because it arguably fixes some of these issues, but regardless, the controls are quite assuredly daunting to a newcomer. Surprisingly though, the much maligned 3DS port of the game actually also includes some interesting control changes which I would argue are an improvement, including, God save the Queen, the ability to crouch and walk at the same time. Yet as undeniable as its flaws may be, I just can't stop loving Snake Eater. What other game can pitch you against a man made of bees in the first half, but still leave you reeling from a gut punch ending? Metal Gear has always existed in a sort of magical reality, and Snake Eater weaves goofy and serious moments together with remarkable dexterity, avoiding the common misconception that effective drama requires a perpetual po-face. If anything, the wackier bits disarm you, so something as humble as the world's longest ladder somehow manages to be beautiful. Snake Eater is a big budget release that retains a clear creative vision, leading to a sensory feast on par with a Calorie Mate. Snake Eater was an acquired taste even when it was raw, and after having been aged for almost 20 years, that has only become more true. It isn't the easiest sell, and my years of experience have dulled me to its learning curve and plentiful cutscenes. Certainly it wouldn't be my first serving suggestion for someone just looking for an appetizer stealth game, since it's less approachable than, say, the new Hitman trilogy. But for better or worse, and despite Konami's attempts, there will never be another game quite like Snake Eater. And I'm glad. In this age when cookie-cutter sequels dominate the market and innovation seems taboo, Kojima's team took a survival knife to the famous franchise and stitched together a freakish classic. It still defies comparison 3 console generations later. Just bear in mind though, that not everybody will find such an exotic beast appetizing, and this is definitely a Marmite game.
Does any of that make sense?
Not even a little.
Like the good old days after 9/11.
I also love the sense of risk and reward that pervades the mechanics. It's often easier to snake by a guard, amazing,